And today we are thriving and making innovation happen in Nebraska. So we have a wonderful panel here to talk about the kinds of businesses that are starting here.
I'm Paul Neuner. I'm the founder and CEO of Telcoin. We're a digital asset wallet whose primary use case is cross-border transfers. We are the first applicant for a digital asset depository institution with the Nebraska Department of Banking and Finance. And our use case with the department is to create an EUSD, which is a bank-issued digital dollar, if you will. We're also doing that globally in Europe with an e-money institute in Mexico, and Australia with Austrac, we're regulated, and with in Singapore and Canada. And we're trying to do that basically with Nebraska as the center, because a lot of these central banks, and I think Congressman Flood will tell you, recently with the central bank in Singapore, for example, they really are reaching out saying, we need the U.S. federal stablecoin legislation to take the lead. So we're trying to really base that all here in Nebraska, or in Norfolk, Nebraska, and excited to be here. And thank you, Dan, also. Good to see you again.
Paul, stablecoins. So could you talk a little bit about stablecoins, for those not familiar, how they make payments, but then also maybe some of your thoughts around federal regulatory issues around stablecoins?
Sure. So when you make a tap payment today, you actually initiate a payment process that goes to like 6 intermediaries to create a contract, identify yourself, and make sure you're creditworthy. Create a contract between you and the merchant, ultimately to execute a ledger balance transfer from your bank to the merchant's bank. And with a stablecoin payment, the idea is that you're really just empowering the digital equivalent of handing the merchant a $20 bill. So you don't necessarily have to identify yourself. You're really just validating that that's a legitimate liability of the issuing bank. So for us, that has lots of ramifications. Obviously, it's in theory more efficient. The system that you can build around that is, I think, more efficient. It also, I think, from a cybersecurity standpoint, obviously, it's very important to what we're trying to do. But also, you got to think about it from the perspective of, do we really want to be worrying about how we can secure sending our banking information everywhere or every transaction? Why does cashless, since COVID-19, mean that you have to identify yourself with every single transaction? So I think that's the other point. I think this can actually be way more secure because you're transacting in a way that that is not necessarily involving you and your banking information in every single transaction. In terms of federal regulation, I think, like I said earlier, the Nebraska, the Department of Banking has been amazing here, and the legislature in passing the Nebraska Financial Innovation Act. The next step, obviously, is federal legislation, and Congressman McHenry and others have done an amazing job in getting us almost there. I think, we'll see how things go over the next couple of months, but I really do think in the next year we'll finally have that, and that'll be key to really also getting the trust around the world for cross-border payments. That's very important.
Paul, you mentioned the Nebraska Financial Innovation Act, and I think, for those of us who know, Nebraska has fabulous regulatory agencies in the terms of the Department of Banking and the Department of Insurance. And I know Kelly Lammers is going to be here to speak later this afternoon. I know the Department of Insurance has a big Silicon Prairie InsurTech conference later this month in Omaha. Attracts all the insurance commissioners from around the country. But I'm kind of curious, because you say regulation and everybody gets, it causes your skin to curl. But I'm just kind of curious in Nebraska, and you're working with the Department of Banking and implementing the Nebraska Financial Innovation Act. How has that gone? What's been your experiences? Can you give us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's no way we could be where we are today with what we're doing without Kelly Lammers and his department. Courageous and really, really bright team that gets what we're doing and got it from the very beginning. The NFIA created the second of its kind in the country after the state of Wyoming. And I think that from the very beginning that, both the legislature and the department realized that they kind of took it. The Wyoming charter was, hey, how do we help institutions custody digital assets, not really thinking about the banking system enough. And that obviously it didn't really end up going so well. What Nebraska did so well is turn it, from the perspective of a bank, how do we make this work? And the existing financial system, and that's been very successful. It's been a long road, but I think, the department has rightly insisted on making sure we do it right. We've had a very, very positive relationship with them, and I think they've also done a great job in communicating this example to the federal regulators and supporting kind of the next step for us really in making this all work and for the country and figuring out how this all works.
President Gold mentioned that, Nebraskans are either here by choice or by birth. I was here by birth. Kind of curious on how long each of you lived in Nebraska and what brought you to the state.
So I met Mike Flood 30 years ago at Notre Dame. After that, went to DC and then started a journey abroad to the Middle East, China, kind of all over the place. And finally ended up based in Tokyo is where we started the company in 2017. And around 2020, realized that if we could figure out how to move the nexus to the United States, at the time, everyone in digital assets was scared of the US and scared of the SEC, et cetera. So I thought that would be a huge value if we could figure that out and take the right path, the regulated path. So I called up Mike and was asking about Wyoming. He said, forget Wyoming, come check out Nebraska. And that was, I guess our meeting with Governor Ricketts was the first time I had a fist pump me. It was right before his initial CDC call, which was the start of all the lockdowns. And he was very supportive. He got it from the very beginning. And so I still am going between I'm actually going between LA and Nebraska. I have a toe in the water though, so I might be a Nebraska resident from next year. We'll see.
I have a question for the panel. What do you see innovating in Nebraska here regarding digital asset banks? This might be more a question for Mr. Neuner, but I'm interested to hear from all of you specifically about people using banks to custody assets and also provide trust services to residents of Nebraska and throughout the world.
Our focus is a little bit more on the issuing of digital cash or stablecoin or what have you. I do think that for custodying third-party digital assets, in other words, digital assets that aren't issued by the your institution, it definitely does need to be firewalled in another sort of, the risk that you're undertaking in digital assets is very different from the rehypothecation risk the FDIC is insuring in that part. So I think it is very important that it be firewalled. But that if this is all going to work, what we're trying to do, we have to also figure out the other side, which is, how does this land on a balance sheet of a bank? Because if you can't have that seamless, like bare metal integration with the traditional financial system, what I'm talking about can't really work.
So my question probably is for Paul. How are you looking at balancing that right to kind of keep your identity and with a digital asset, but satisfying our regulatory obligation around combating financial terrorism? Recently went through an exam and that was all the focus in my division. So I'd like to kind of hear how you guys are approaching that.
Well, I think the key is providing a regulated doorway, just like the internet. If you force all the ISPs to know their customer, the internet is a place where you can be totally anonymous and float all over the place. But as long as you regulate the doorway, we suddenly now have visibility into communications all around the world that we didn't have in circuit switch data days. The same thing today. You don't really know beyond that form that someone filled out in Western Union what's going on beyond our borders. So I think that if you really do provide a regulated doorway into this and connect it properly with the traditional financial system, we'll end up being at the middle of the internet of money, and we'll end up having visibility into transactions all around the world. That is frankly a national security asset. But yeah, it takes being a little bit more creative to figure out how to trace it, but is way more traceable than traditional money. And I think the other side of this is privacy too. The fact that, if you try to really just push our banking information all over the place with every transaction, you're also exposing all of us to potential more criminal activity that are as a so the extent that I think you think about it, not only how do you find the bad people, but how do we also protect ourselves by allowing people to transact without necessarily sharing all their data every time.
I'm a student at Wayne State College, and as we several students here, as we all prepare to graduate, what are some of the pieces that we can start doing both in the state of Nebraska and for ourselves to best prepare ourselves for entering that career?
I'd love to comment too that in our team in Norfolk, we took on our first intern from Wayne State and really ended up being one of our best employees. And how cool is it that we have this Wayne State grad sitting in Norfolk working on these financial, technical accounting of European Central Bank micro-regulation, digital cash payments for our e-money institution there, and in all these countries around the world, sitting in Norfolk. So really great experience with that. I would encourage people to try it, to intern with startups, even if your goal is to, after graduation, go with a larger firm. I think you learn a lot doing that.
Please join me in thanking our panel for this morning.